The morning is glass cold, the kind that makes Manhattan's skyline look sharpened. At LaGuardia's Gate C, Flight 1749 boards under a pale sun, an Airbus A320 bristling with frost and steam. The cabin hums with coffee chatter. Commuters, a nurse flying home on standby, an amateur photographer who has promised himself he'll shoot the city from above just once. Near the front, a man in his 50s in a navy blazer moves with quiet economy. He is Captain Chesley Sullenberger, hair silver, posture straight, voice gentle enough to lower shoulders. The first officer, a career aviator with the patient hands of a piano teacher, runs his checks. They've done this dance 1,000 times. The flow from battery to APU, from fuel pumps to hydraulics, the call and response that turns dead aluminum into an organism. In the cabin, lead flight attendant Maria Torres counts heads and tests the door slide indicators with a knuckle tap. She's flown winter mornings like this for years. She knows the way January takes the noise out of a plane. Passengers settle. A businessman closes his laptop with the punctuation of someone who has memorized taxi times. A teenage boy switches his phone to airplane mode but keeps filming, the wing neat and bright in the frame. Seatbelts click. That small chorus that means a wider world is about to narrow to a single aisle, a single crew, a single moment. Up front, the captain signs the last dispatch strip. Weather cold but clear, winds light, no convective threats, no icing beyond standard precautions. A normal flight, the kind you forget by dinner. On the intercom, he delivers the calmest of scripts. Altitude, flight time, the whole little liturgy of airline life. No one remembers the exact wording later, only the tone, steady and squared away, as if he's already looking over the next horizon on everyone's behalf. Pushback begins. The tug nods, the marshaller pinwheels his wands, and the A320 rolls away from the gate like it's leaving a cradle. The APU coughs a healthy glow into the systems, and both engines spin to life, twin circles of controlled fire. The cabin quivers with the idle that pilots learn to feel through their bones. Out the windows, the runway looks like a white ruler laid across steel water. The Hudson glitters, already the set for an act no one yet imagines. Taxi is uneventful, a small delay for sequencing. Maria demonstrates safety with the ease of someone telling friends how to find the exits in her living room. Then walks the aisle, nodding, touching shoulders lightly, collecting the stray bag that tries to play rogue. Her hand brushes row 12, seat A, where an elementary school teacher named Danielle Brooks sits, hands pressed together beneath the blanket the airline still gives out on morning runs. Danielle's fear of flying arrived after a rough landing years ago, and each takeoff since has been a private negotiation. Today, the captain's voice has made the math easier. Line up and wait. The airplane eases onto the runway's centerline, paint, rubber, frost, and pauses. Checklists complete, thrust levers forward. The sound builds from murmur to certainty. Hearts rise with the nose wheel. The Airbus rotates, slips the ground, and the city rearranges itself into a postcard. Climb out is clean. Airspeed healthy, pitch proper, flaps stepping back as lift consolidates into speed. The captain is eyes out. The first officer is eyes in, monitoring the tapestry of numbers that tie the machine to physics. For all the drama the skies sometimes deliver, most flights are poems of routine. Inside this cabin, routine stretches like a warm blanket. A minute into the air, Danielle exhales. Finally. The teenage videographer captures downtown under a wash of winter light. A businessman drafts an email he will never send. Maria secures the galley and reaches for the water jug, the one she'll later pour like a ritual to keep shaking fingers busy. Up front, the captain makes a small correction, nudging the nose to thread a corridor between departure paths. A routine day, the kind of morning that is the proof of civil aviation. Practice, systems, discipline. No one intends to become a witness. No one chooses to hold in their mouth the taste of cold river water. Yet the plane is already sliding toward the place where training stops being the story you tell about your job and becomes the exact muscles you trust. For now, the A320 climbs and the Hudson lies below like a silver runway that doesn't yet know it is one. The cockpit clock steps past 90 seconds after liftoff. The jet is light, nimble. The engine instruments are green. The cruise scan is unbroken. Attitude, speed, climb rate, heading. ATC hands them off with crisp efficiency. The captain's left hand is on the side stick. The first officer's right palm hovers near the thrust levers, a pose born of shared vigilance. Then the sky erupts. It's not thunder. Its impact, like several sacks of wet sand hurled into spinning fans. The airplane shudders, thuds scatter along the fuselage. Out the windshield, a dense smudge of grey and black shapes, birds where air should be. A sudden spray of feathers streams past the side windows like torn confetti. Both pilots feel the yaw, an instinctive alarm from the airplane's spine. The left engine coughs, the right engine booms with a deeper, uglier note. Stall warnings do not sound. The speed is fine. But the cockpit goes wrong with the quiet that is worse than noise. ECAM messages bloom, those tidy lines of text that are supposed to be manageable one at a time. Now they stack. ENG1, fail. ENG2, abnorm. A smell like singed poultry and kerosene slips through the vents. The captain doesn't hunt for poetry. He moves for procedure. "My aircraft," he says with a voice that makes a decision into a fulcrum. The first officer goes heads down, calling and doing, confirming the loss of thrust in both engines. Everything they've practiced for years, the muscle memory of emergencies, must now be compressed into seconds. At this altitude, options are an equation scribbled in chalk that the wind is already blowing away. Turn back to LaGuardia. Tempting, even obvious to anyone without a moving map in their head. Divert to Teterboro. Closer, perhaps, a straight shot if glide allows. Or find a third path, one no checklist sells as plan A. A river at your 11 o'clock, long and mercilessly cold, but laid out like mercy. Behind the cockpit door, cabin reality lurches. The passengers feel the lurch and fade as thrust dies. A seated woman's water cup sails, cool beads spangling her jacket. The businessman looks up, confused that his internal clock says it's too early for a turn. The teenage videographer, still filming, picks up a change in the sound. Engines from confident to coarse to hollow, like the background has been yanked out of a song. Maria Torres doesn't wait for someone to tell her what fear looks like. She knows. She locks eyes with Danielle in 12A. The blanket is now a lifeline twisted in two white fists. Maria bends, voice steady and low. "You're okay. We're trained. Listen for my command." She moves to the forward interphone, listening for the chime, watching the cabin's micro-symptoms. The way hands start to creep toward armrests, the way eyes leave their neighbors and aim at the front. Up front, the captain makes one giant, quiet move. He points the nose toward the Hudson River. He has done math faster than any calculator. Altitude and glide, wind and distance, the angle that keeps energy in the bank without letting the wings starve. "We'll be in the Hudson," he transmits after a fast exchange with ATC, who are stacking options like a frantic concierge. LaGuardia, runway 13, Teterboro, runway 1. The captain replies with finality. Unable. It isn't resignation. It is precision, saying yes to the only runway that exists. Technical facts compress into motion. APU started early to keep electrics alive. Ignition selected, relights attempted because pilots do not surrender even to physics without a dignified fight. But goose strikes at this altitude and speed can turn engines into sculpture. One engine mauled, the other coughing but not producing useful thrust. The airplane is now a glider with the weight of a neighborhood. Cabin crew brace for the pivot they've taught in classrooms, but measured here against faces. Maria lifts the handset. The command, the one that must be clear, unambiguous and definitive, is brace, brace, heads down, stay down. It is not screamed, it is delivered like law. Passengers fold into themselves, foreheads to forearms, ankles back, as if describing with their bodies the outline of a survival space. In those seconds, the captain is sculpting the flight path. He keeps wings level, pitch disciplined, trading altitude for distance with a miser's care. He's looking for clean water, free of barges, ice floes, rescue boats. Too far north and the river narrows, too far south and ferry traffic thickens. A tiny shift of bank, a breath of rudder, roads drawn on air. He lowers flaps to increase lift at slow speed. He keeps the landing gear up. On water, wheels are hooks. He sets approach attitude for a controlled ditching, the rarest of airline maneuvers. The city watches, though it doesn't yet know what it's seeing. On the West Side Highway, a cyclist brakes hard, phone raised. On a ferry deck, a crewman squints toward the descending glint. In a riverside apartment, a child presses a forehead to cold glass and says, "Look, Mummy, a plane on the water," as if it were a toy. The checklist is still a presence. Memory items first, flow where flow fits, but the truth is that judgment leads. The first officer reads, cross-checks, arms the ditching panel. The captain flies. 2 lifetimes of drills resolve into this one steady hand. In the cabin, Maria walks the line again, eyes catching eyes, and says the only thing that keeps panic behind a locked door. "We're with you." The Airbus slides down the Hudson corridor with a deliberate grace, nose slightly raised, speed bleeding toward a number the captain likes. Too fast and the water will treat aluminum like porcelain. Too slow and a wingtip could snatch the river and cartwheel lives. The captain holds the attitude he wants, a hair above on speed, enough energy to cushion the last few feet. Flaps down, slats extending that fatten the wing, he coaxes maximum lift from cold air. The gear stays retracted. There's no ground to roll on, only a surface to kiss without biting. A final call goes to the cabin. Maria hears the cockpit's tone in the intercom, assurance without ornament. She repeats the brace command in a cadence that keeps hearts marching. Down the aisle, the crew move like human metronomes, resetting postures, clearing loose items, latching galleys, pushing bodies gently deeper into the positions that matter. The teenage videographer stuffs his phone into his pocket, suddenly loyal to the idea that both hands might be needed for living. On the river, tiny whitecaps scud east. The captain aligns with the current to avoid a lateral drift that could tear the fuselage. He studies the texture of the water ahead the way a bush pilot studies a gravel bar. He wants a touchdown that spreads force across the belly in a long sigh, not a punch. The first officer calls out airspeeds and sink rates that stitch numbers into touch. Their voices are level, their sentences short, no adjectives, just facts. The APU hums, electric steady. The airplane's heart, even wounded, has not stopped. Then contact, not a slam, not an explosion, but a long, rough-edged hiss as hull meets river. A spray like diamonds erupts along the windows. The cabin feels weight returning in a new geometry. The forward section dips and rises. The tail slaps and skims. Inside the cockpit, hands are still secure through the slide. The airplane rides her own bow wave, decelerating with discipline, nose tracking straight, the pilot's inputs smoothing invisible wobbles before they can grow teeth. The deceleration is violent enough to buckle breath, but contained. Overhead bins rattle but hold. The structural design, breakaway points, reinforced belly, earns its lines of math. Within seconds, the plane has turned from flight to float, a boat with aluminum skin. The captain lowers the nose gently as speed fades, managing pitch to prevent a fatal nose dig. The airplane fidgets into the stillness of survival. Silence follows, shocked and muscular. It's broken first by Maria's voice. "Release your seatbelts. Leave everything." This is no place for laptops. She opens the forward door. The slide inflates into a lifer raft, bright and absurd against grey water. At mid-cabin, other attendants pop their doors. Cold spray jumps inside, slicing cheeks, a scent of river soil and winter iron. Passengers hesitate, then move, yanked by the clarity of commands. On the wings, which now serve as porches to life, people step out into a world that sucks heat like a thief. Shoes slip on wet metal. A man goes to his knees. A stranger catches his jacket collar and lifts. The teenage videographer is again filming with trembling hands, recording boots, spray, a woman's prayer. The captain's profile framed in the cockpit window as he arranges switches and scans for fire. Inside, he orders a full evacuation, then stands to go cabin side. Pilots do not leave first. Airmanship isn't rank, it's sequence. Cold physics takes over. Water is pushing inside at the seams, rising along the aisles in thin fingers. The crew direct bodies to the exits that present best, redirect lines when a slide sags or a raft crowds. Over here, step, sit, slide. Maria has the voice of a lighthouse, unwavering, returning to the same string of syllables as if they've saved people before and will again. From shore, the first ferries are already peeling off their routes. Captains with decades on the river understand instantly what has happened. They are already turning. In the cockpit, transmissions to ATC are short and practical. Status, location drift, the absence of fire, vital details to feed the swarm that will converge. The captain's call is not a silence, but a frequency, the pitch at which other professionals lock in. On the left wing, Danielle Brooks stands ankle-deep in river water on aluminum that is not meant to be a dock. The shock has drained her of everything but obedience. A crew member shouts for people to move outward, to balance the wing, to keep the tip from dipping. Arms wrap around children, around elders. Men lift women they do not know. A passenger in a grey hoodie laughs once, a strange barked exhale, something his body does when terror exits by a side door. In the cabin, the captain and first officer run a last scan from cockpit to tail. They check for breathing, for motion, for anyone frozen by fear. They call into lavatories, tug at curtains, lift blankets. They will be the last to leave if the river gives them the time. The airplane groans, a long metallic animal that has done more than it was ever asked to do. On the wings, people huddle. The human instinct to become a single larger creature under weather. The rescue is now a race not against panic, but against temperature. The first ferry horn splits the cold. A NY waterway boat, crew already gloved and life-ringed, throws its throttle forward and carves a wake that lifts the stalled airplane and shoves it fractionally toward the Manhattan shore. On the radio nets, clipped voices stack into order. Coast Guard, NYPD Harbor, FDNY Marine, Port Authority, EMS. No one has called a symphony, yet music happens. 1,000 fragments of professionalism aligning in the city's bloodstream. Deckhands lean over the ferry's rail with Jacob's ladders and ring buoys. They shout simple commands. Hands! Eyes here! One at a time! The first passengers to the ferry deck look like statues of winter, faces greyed by cold, hair frosted, eyes huge. Crew pull them aboard with the economy of people who lift for a living, no wasted motion, no drama. They herd the rescued into the cabin, wrapping them in whatever exists. Foil blankets, seat cushions, coats stripped from strangers. A ferry captain makes a call that no one asked for, and everyone blesses. Full reverse, keep the airplane steady. From the Jersey side, more ferries swing wide. Police boats harpoon the gap between air and sea with rubber fenders. A Coast Guard cutter lunges upriver, siren a thin blue blade. On the bank, an EMS incident commander marks out triage zones with flags and chalk on asphalt. He smashes into motion a mass casualty plan written for 100 possible nightmares, and exactly this one. Ambulances peel off, handlers assign hypothermia kits, hospitals get warned to prep warm IV fluids and heated rooms. The city, old at emergencies, is once again young at speed. On the A320's wing, the human map shifts. Passengers are redistributed to keep the wingtips from sipping water. A flight attendant at the overwing door yells, "Feet first, sit and scoot." A ridiculous string of words that becomes profound when a river is your floor. A large man freezes at the door. He's never slid in his life. The teenage videographer puts the phone in his pocket again, plants both hands on the man's shoulders, and ushers him out like a bouncer at a club. A role reversal that makes them both laugh for 1 second, and then not at all. Inside, the water creeps up the carpet steps. The captain keeps the airplane balanced, not because he can command the river, but because he can minimize insult. He checks again. All clear? And receives nods that travel up the aisle like a wave. The first officer steps through the forward door onto the slide, feels the pain of cold air in his teeth, and helps lower a child, then a grandmother with a thank you that sounds like a hymn. A police helicopter hangs above, rotors printing stripes on the river. A diver in a black suit and red helmet drops a rescue sling to the wing. "Harness on, one at a time," he yells, voice white out by the prop wash. A passenger refuses the sling, gesturing to a woman behind him. Priority unfolds naturally. On the ferry deck, a medic counts pulses with 2 fingers and a clock in his head calling out, "Core cold, warm slow." They don't warm hypothermic people fast. They respect biology. The timeline is obscene in its generosity, minutes, not hours. Civilian boat captains, men and women who spent their mornings moving commuters, become first responders by instinct and proximity. They angle their hulls to create a lee against the January wind, building a little artificial harbor for a jetliner that never bought a ticket to the water. The FDNY Marine units arrive with fire suppression foam ready and thermal blankets stacked. Police officers unclasp sidearms because metal freezes to hands, then lean all their weight into hauling. Maria remembers to count, always count. Each face becomes a number in a chain. She announces to the incident commander, "From the forward doors, 24, while a colleague at the overwing doors shouts, 32 here. Cold math that turns chaos into a ledger of lives. A bystander on the ferry hands over his scarf. Another gives his gloves. Someone passes styrofoam cups of coffee down the line that taste better than all the coffee in the city. Through it all, the captain remains like a keel. He is last among his crew to step into the raft, and only after a final walk to the tail cone, calling out, clapping, peering, he carries a flashlight that arcs light into corners where fear could hide. Satisfied, he turns, steps into the raft, and is pulled across to a ferry where officers lift him by elbows that have flown more miles than most people have driven. He does not pose. He does not narrate. He checks again with Maria, with his first officer, with anyone wearing a badge or a name tag or simply eyes that care. On shore, the rescued become patients and then citizens again. Heaters purr in triage tents. Dry socks come from bins. A woman's hair is towel scrubbed by a stranger with the softness of a sister. They ask to call family. Phones appear, a scatter of borrowed lifelines with battery percentages that will matter later. News helicopters begin to arrive, but they feel like afterthoughts. The real story is the ferry deck crowded with shivering body heat, hands on hands, a city knitting itself around a pocket of disaster and turning it, stitch by stitch, into a story of craft. The airplane is afloat but wounded, a cold box rolling in tiny swells. Inside, the evacuation becomes choreography, not panic, but timed, practiced movement powered by voices that don't shake. Maria Torres plants herself at the forward door, legs braced, one hand on the assist handle, the other pointing, "Seatbelts off! Leave everything! Come to me!" Passengers hesitate over laptop bags and coats. She cuts through it with the simplest equation: weight costs time. The slide raft blossoms orange against grey, and she uses her palm to meter the flow. Child, elder, single traveller, pair, each a small decision in a larger math. At the overwing exits, attendants pop the hatches and pull the manual inflation handle. The slides unroll and hiss. A tall passenger blocks the door. His frame won't bend. "Feet first, sit and scoot," the attendant repeats, tapping the sill to show the path. Behind him, the teenage videographer clips the phone to his jacket and uses both hands to guide strangers onto the wing. Danielle Brooks in 12A stands because a crew member lends her posture, a firm elbow, a sentence at her ear. "Breathe with me. 1, 2, now go." She does. Up front, the cockpit is all switches and sequence. The captain confirms engines shut, fuel off, and electrics stable on the APU. The ditch button has closed valves and inlets to slow water ingress. The first officer makes a rapid pass through the cabin to check for anyone trapped by shock or stubbornness, the two great anchors. He bangs on lavatory doors, yells into the galley, kneels by a man fumbling a seatbelt that somehow re-knotted itself. "Thumb here, pull, you're good." They move. Water reaches the forward aisle in a thin silver tongue. The crew redirects flow to exits with better freeboard, reading the airplane's balance, like bartenders read a glass. On the wing, passengers spread outward so weight doesn't drown the tip. A bareheaded man tries to walk the slick surface like a sidewalk. A stranger grabs his belt and makes a new rule: hands and knees. A woman does not want to step into the raft because she hates heights. A deckhand on the nearest ferry yells, "Eyes on me, step, sit, slide." His voice builds a bridge she trusts. Throughout, the captain is present but not performative. He calls the evacuation, scans the panels, pockets the flashlight he will use to punch certainty into corners, and steps into the cabin last. "All clear?" he calls to each attendant. Each returns a number, counted, not guessed. At the tail, he yanks a curtain aside, peers into a shadow where no one is, and turns back. He's not saving the day alone. He's staying inside the system that saves days when everyone owns their inch of it. Outside, ferries bite their throttles to create a lee. Deck crews throw Jacob's ladders and heaving lines. A police boat eases to the left wing like a hand to a shoulder. The slipstream from a helicopter tries to turn the wing into a trampoline. The pilot adjusts to keep rotor wash from stealing footing. Rescuers speak in verbs: grab, step, hold, pass. Each verb is a rung in the short ladder between cold water and steel deck. Maria counts again. 24 off the forward door. The mid-cabin crew answers, 32 at the over-wing. Numbers move from mouths to notepads to a sergeant's radio. A boy emerges with a teddy bear soaked to twice its size. A cop wraps the bear in foil because belief matters. On the ferry, strangers become family for 20 minutes. Gloves handed over, scarves tied, coats shoved into arms that shiver. A medic shouts, "Warm slow," because bodies can break if heated too fast. The captain steps into the last raft when the last seat is empty on purpose, then turns to look once more at the airplane that did not quit. This was not luck wearing a pilot's uniform. It was aerodynamics and systems behaving as designed under a captain who understood their language. The bird strike, a dense flock at climb out, robbed both engines of useful thrust. Fan blades that tolerate rain, hail, and the occasional gull were shocked by multiple bodies, stalling airflow and shredding efficiency. The cockpit ECAM began its tidy sermon: ENG fail, relight, ignition continuous. But time was thinner than paper. The crew did what Airbus crews are taught: fly first, use memory items, then backfill with checklists as seconds permit. To stay aloft, the captain aimed for best glide, the airspeed where lift to drag is sweetest and distance per foot of altitude is maximized. Nose too high, you bleed speed and quarter stall. Nose too low, you eat up altitude you can't buy back. He held an attitude that kept buffet away and options alive. The APU, usually a ground creature, was started early to feed electrics and hydraulics, preventing a dark cockpit and slow systems. The ram air turbine could have been a backup windmill if needed. With the APU online, control laws stayed stable, flight computers fed, and the airplane remained a predictable animal. Configuration mattered. Gear up. Wheels become anchors on water. Flaps extended enough to fatten the wing and reduce touchdown speed, but not so much as to invite sink. The captain aligned with the river's flow to minimize sideways energy. A wingtip catching a cross-current can turn a landing into a roll. He targeted a shallow descent rate, a slight nose-up attitude, and a pitch that would let the tail kiss first, belly next, bleeding momentum across water like a skipped stone. Design helped. The A320's fuselage has compartments that resist immediate flooding. The ditching push-button closed valves, and the outflow gears limited water ingress. The crew armed the slide's rafts, turning exits into lifeboats. The cabin crew's commands protected spines and faces when the hull met the river. Heads down, stay down is not theatre. It's biomechanics. The airframe took the hit along its long axis, force distributed by pitch control and discipline. On the river, drag became ally. Water slowed the jet faster than brakes could have on ice. Directional control came from the captain riding rudder and aileron through spray, keeping the nose on a line to avoid a slough. The airplane's skeleton groaned but held. Windows flexed, bins shuddered, but restraint systems did what they were born for. When speed washed off, buoyancy, temporary but sufficient, kept the cabin above the freezing line. If any piece had failed, the APU not starting, the checklist discipline fraying, flaps misset, an early pitch up into a stall, a late flare into a slam, 1749 would be a memorial, not a case study. Instead, it became proof that airmanship is the lived edge between diagram and day, that CRM merges many hands into one brain, that design buys time, and time is life. This was not miracle thinking. It was engineering used at full value by people who refuse to panic. On the frequency, the first call after the strike is short and spare. The captain answers, offers like a surgeon triaging in a hallway. LaGuardia, unable. Teterboro, unable. He declares, then switches attention back to flying the glide. Controllers become air traffic tailors, knitting a no-conflict corridor down the river and warning other flights to hold clear of a path no chart ever promised. Information that matters moves. Commentary does not. That economy of words is how professionals talk when seconds are money. Meanwhile, the maritime network wakes. NY waterway ferry captains do not await orders. They turn. Someone on a deck radios a position fix that is better than a street address. Mid-river off 50th. Coast Guard calls small boat stations to spool up. NYPD Harbor angles in with divers and baskets. FDNY Marine units pre-stage foam and pumps, thinking 2 moves ahead in case a slick or a spark appears. A unified command forms in minutes, badges from different wallets standing shoulder to shoulder with a map, a marker, and a common intent. On shore, an EMS incident commander opens the mass casualty playbook to the hypothermia page. Triage zones get tape and numbers, ambulances split as ALS BLS by habit, hospitals spin up warming rooms and call in extra hands. Port Authority police lock down a riverside lane to build a funnel from bulkhead to ambulance without curious feet in the way. None of this is romantic. All of it is craft. The first ferry arrives within minutes, bellowing a horn that doubles as a beacon for other boats. Deckhands throw rings and yell instructional verbs. A simple routine emerges. Raft to ladder, ladder to deck, deck to bench and blanket. A cop who once worked construction counts aloud as bodies come over the rail, every fifth allowed 5 to keep math from smearing. On a second ferry, a crew chief barks, make a windbreak, and humans with coats become a wall around the shivering. ATC continues to work air, while the city works water. Helicopters are pushed to safe altitudes to limit rotor wash. A controller's last note to the ditching aircraft is as human as it is professional. You'll be okay. Back on the river, a deckhand swaps his gloves onto a passenger's hands because he can buy new gloves. A diver checks underwing for leaks that could trap air and pin the fuselage. He gives a thumbs up, the universal language of, for now, fine. All of it happens fast, without hurry. The record isn't a scoreboard number, it's the sensation shared by survivors that help arrived while they were still surprised. Radios do not make speeches. They assign, confirm, move. The river becomes a temporary runway and then a temporary emergency room, because a city that trains for one kind of trouble can often treat another. Flight 1749 lands once, then lands again into hands that know what to do. Danielle Brooks, 12A, teacher. When the engines went quiet, I thought that was the sound of dying. Then I heard a woman say, "Heads down." The sentence plugged a hole in me. On the wing, I could see my breath. My legs didn't belong to me. A hand on my back kept me from sitting. Later, someone said it was a cop. I never saw his face. I remember the captain's eyes once through glass, checking, not asking, checking. That said we mattered. Evan, 17, student with a camera. I was filming for like a vlog. When the birds hit, the sound was like dropping marbles into a blender. I kept recording until Maria told me, "Hands free now." I shoved the phone in my pocket and felt dumb for thinking this would make views. On the ferry, I played the clip for an EMT. She said, "You kept your head." That helped. That's the first time I realized videos are also evidence. VJ, consultant, aisle seat. I always believed in process. Slide training sounds theoretical until it's not. The attendant spoke in short commands, and it gave my brain something to grip. I wanted my briefcase. I left it. On the ferry, they wrapped me in foil that sounded like applause. I cried into it once, and then stopped because the deckhand stared at me like, "We're not done." He was right. There were more people behind me. Maria Torres, lead flight attendant. Passengers think calm is a personality trait. It's a choice, rehearsed until it looks natural. I locked eyes with people and gave them verbs. Verbs move bodies. Nouns just describe the mess. My crew? We've drilled door malfunctions in a basement with a rubber slide and a stopwatch. Today the stopwatch was the river temperature. We didn't race, we worked the list. Luis, ferry deckhand. We don't call ourselves heroes. We call ourselves early. We were close, so we turned. That's the job. You throw ladders, you yell words that make sense, you pull, and you don't let go. That day I gave my gloves to a guy whose hands were grey. He tried to give them back on the dock. I told him, "Keep 'em. Next time you see a boat, wave with those." Officer Reed, NYPD Harbor. People imagine it's chaos. It's loud order. We've got channels, sectors, roles. I remember the captain stepping off the last raft. He didn't look around for cameras, he looked for crew. He counted with us. When a leader's first move is to account for others, the whole scene straightens. Ava, nurse on standby. In the triage tent, I helped warm strangers, hands under armpits, blankets over heads, sips of sweet tea. One woman kept apologizing for being wet. I told her, "You did perfect. You're here." Later, I saw a photo of the plane on the water. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it looked impossible and we had made it ordinary by doing the next thing and the next. These voices don't worship miracle. They honor method under pressure. They orbit one point. Cool heads gave them something to copy. Survival was contagious. If aviation has a religion, its creed is aviate, navigate, communicate. On 1749, that order was kept like a vow. The captain flew the profile, while the first officer ran the book, scanning ECAM, calling airspeeds, arming systems that mattered. There was no argument about turnback temptation because the captain framed the choice. Altitude, distance, wind, and glide. Don't care about nostalgia. With the river selected, the cockpit turned from debate to execution. Crew Resource Management, CRM, is not a slogan. It's a pact. It says the best ideas can come from the jump seat or row 27, and the leader's job is to harvest them fast without losing the thread. In practice, that means tones are flat, sentences short, and egos parked. The first officer's cadence, facts without adjectives, protected bandwidth. The cabin crew's intercom reports were crisp. Smoke, no smoke. Fire, no fire. Doors, armed. No one freelanced. Everyone owned their square. What looks like calm under pressure is really pressure turned into tasks. The captain kept task saturation from blooming by choosing what not to do. No turn-back experiment, no hero maneuvers, and by trusting training to cover the rest. When he told ATC unable, he wasn't being dramatic. He was protecting the cockpit's attention, spending words like fuel. That choice rippled outward. Controllers trimmed their speech to the essentials. Ferries moved without speeches. Police boats took lanes without debate. Leadership shortened sentences citywide. Communication to passengers mattered too. Brace is ugly. It is also mercifully clear. Leave everything breaks hearts that want photographs and laptops. It replaces those attachments with a new one. Life. In the aisle, attendants used touch judiciously, back of a hand on a shoulder, palm at a hip, not to console, but to steer. That is CRM in the cabin. Words plus contact equals motion. Post-landing, the same creed continued. The captain and first officer split duties, one powering down, one sweeping the cabin, so that no soul was left in a pocket of shock or a bathroom stall. The last-off ethos is not about hero shots. It's about redundant eyes, because fear is sticky and can glue a person to a seat long after legs are ready. This is why 1749 is cited in safety classrooms. It shows that discipline is kindness when seconds are few. The miracle talk fades, the method remains. Checklists flexible but firm, roles respected, communication decluttered, and authority used as a shield, not a sword. When metal cools and pulses return to normal, the next ritual begins: debrief. Investigators pull the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, then rebuild the day second by second, power settings, pitch, bank, speeds, callouts. They model glide paths to test the what-ifs, return to field, diversion to another runway, hold over open water. On paper, a turn-back sometimes looks plausible. In real air, with human reaction time and engine spool-down realities, the math turns brittle. The river choice holds. Engineers autopsy the engines. They find ingested birds, bent blades, gouged casings, evidence of how even modern turbofans can be overwhelmed by mass arriving at jet speeds. Species identification, down to feathers and DNA, feeds wildlife management around airports, habitat control, radar trials, seasonal patterns. The report favors systems learning over blame. It's never about hanging a name on a hook. It's about closing loops. Across the airline, training departments update slides and scenario scripts. Dual engine loss after takeoff, once a near fiction in the simulator, becomes a recurring drill. Instructors emphasize early APU start, configuration discipline, selection of ditching sites when land is a bad bargain, and clear cabin commands. Ferry and harbour services run joint exercises so that next time radios knit even faster. Hospitals review hypothermia protocols and replenishment of warming kits. The city sketches a better waterborne triage flow based on what went right and where elbows bumped. The crew debrief too. In a quiet room, they walk through the time-compressed decision tree, naming what they saw, what they said, what they nearly said but didn't. They log tiny improvements, a phrase they might sharpen, a checklist item to elevate, an interphone habit to standardize. None of it glamorizes, all of it sharpens. The captain speaks little, the notes are on systems and teamwork, not on himself. That restraint is a lesson by itself. Professionalism loves the plural. When a report is published, the headline for insiders isn't miracle. It's validation that procedures crafted in classrooms work in weather when leadership refuses to get loud. The takeaways land where they must. In syllabi, simulators, dispatch protocols, river charts, and the hands of people who will one day be asked to solve physics with a city watching. The photo most people remember is a jetliner floating like a misplaced train car. Wings crowded with dark dots that are people. But the reason Flight 1749 became a symbol isn't the image. It's the stack of quiet choices behind it. A captain declined the seductive myth of turning back. A first officer fed the cockpit with the right numbers at the right time. Cabin crew translated fear into posture and motion. River captains rejected spectatorhood and became responders. Police and firefighters cooperated without a shouting match over turf. An EMS chief made warmth, not spectacle, the center of gravity. In the noisy era, competence is cinematic. 1749 reminded the public that airline travel is held up by craft, not charisma. It showcased CRM to a world that usually never hears that acronym, and it reframed heroism as something plural and procedural. The story slid into classrooms far from aviation: medicine, fire science, nuclear plants, even software ops, as a parable. When complexity collapses, tone and teamwork keep systems from collapsing with it. It also reset conversations about risk. Bird hazards received boring but vital funding. Interagency drills won calendar slots. Ferry crews were formally woven into response plans. Passengers learned the non-negotiables: listen for brace, leave belongings, find the nearest exit behind you. They saw that your best chance is almost always to copy the pros, not to invent a personal escape plan in the moment. And it gave the culture a face for professional courage. A pilot who spoke softly, chose physics over fantasy, and then declined to be the main character. That restraint, multiplied across a crew and a city, is why 1749 still gets cited not as magic, but as standard raised to its full height. The takeaway isn't "thank goodness," it's "train like this." Later, there are dry clothes and hot broth, phone calls and headlines, therapy and sleep that comes in fragments. The airplane is craned from the Hudson, water pouring from its belly like a second river. Mechanics touch her skin the way medics touch a patient after a marathon, with respect. Passengers return to schools, desks, construction sites, kitchens. Some change jobs. Some carry a folded foil blanket in a drawer, a private trophy from a day when clarity beat panic. The captain testifies, debriefs, teaches without preaching. He frames the day as system success, airmanship, CRM, design, rescue culture. In simulators, crews everywhere replay the profile. Engine silence, APU hum, river alignment, flair that is more caress than flair. Ferry crews hang a quiet photo in a break room and call it a Tuesday done well. An EMS lieutenant rewrites his warming protocol to move coffee higher on the checklist because he saw what steam does to frightened faces. The myth machine will always try to sand the story into a single name, but the truest version resists the sanding. It leaves fingerprints. Maria's cadence at the door, the first officer's non-dramatic call-outs, the deckhand's gloves on a stranger's hands, the cop counting 5 into the wind, Danielle standing on a wing she never believed could be a flaw. It leaves one sentence that belongs on every wall where people train to keep others alive. Be the calm someone can copy. Flight 1749 did not end in a headline about loss. It ended in a ledger of competence. When the water froze breath and the noise dropped out, professionalism made sound. The thump of rafts, the creak of a hull that held, the clipped language of crews who know their craft. That is why, years later, this story still teaches. Not because it is incredible, but because it is repeatable when people choose method over myth and duty over drama.